It all started on a Tuesday morning, the kind where the sun bounces off the steel posts of my ranch gate and the dust hangs in the air like a warning. When the silence shattered, not with gunfire, not with sirens, but with a grinding buzz that told me something was terribly wrong. I had reinforced the entrance months ago, welded steel with biometric locks, sensors wired to my private system, and a redundant power backup sourced directly from a solar rig, not because I feared cattle rustlers or wild coyotes, but because of one person. Karen Wexley, HOA President of the neighboring development, known for her blonde bob, tactical yoga pants, and obsession with controlling everything that touched her community boundaries. I'd caught her once leaning over the fence with a clipboard and binoculars, mumbling into a walkie-talkie about code violations on my ranch, as if my horse barn was subject to her HOA rules. I lived on private land, sovereign and documented since 1918, not part of any HOA, a fact that seemed to drive Karen insane. That morning, I watched on my CCTV feed as her silver Audi rolled right up to my gate, two tech-looking goons jumping out with laptop bags and toolkits. I recognized one of them, a disgraced IT consultant from a data breach incident in Austin. They weren't here for maintenance. They were here to breach my gate, override the security, and no doubt inspect my land under some bogus pretense of community standards. I activated the voice broadcast on my gate speakers. "You are trespassing on federally documented private property. Leave immediately or law enforcement will be notified." Karen didn't flinch. She simply stared up at the camera, smiled, and waved like she was hosting a bake sale. Then she did the unthinkable. She picked up the emergency call box next to my gate, punched 911, and started yelling, "There's a violent man on this ranch. He's threatening HOA staff and holding people hostage with weapons." I stood frozen for half a second, watching her lie to the dispatcher with tears in her voice and fabricated terror. This wasn't trespass anymore, it was swatting. But what Karen didn't know, and what she would learn in exactly 36 seconds, was that my daughter Haley was home, and Haley wasn't just visiting the ranch. She was on leave from the FBI, specializing in cybercrime and counter-terrorism, and she'd installed a real-time alert system the last time Karen tried something petty like dropping HOA notices in our Balar mailbox. As Karen continued her Oscar-worthy 911 performance, Haley walked calmly out of the ranch house, wearing her FBI jacket, badge clipped, block holstered. She signaled the automated call dispatch, then flipped a red switch labeled Perimeter Lockdown. The ranch transformed hydraulic bollards rose from the gravel road behind Karen's car. Steel trapdoors sealed the fence's base, and our K9 Unit 6 trained German shepherds from a retired military basher. Kennel activated. Haley called it soft containment. I just called it beautiful.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Soft containment. I just called it beautiful. Exactly 36 seconds after Karen dialed 911, the real sheriffs arrived. Not HOA security, but county deputies with flashing lights, a SWAT-capable K9 handler, and a federal liaison who recognized Haley immediately. What followed next was chaos for Karen and poetic justice for us. The deputies drew down, ordered everyone to the ground. Karen screamed, "I called you! Arrest him!" But Haley stepped forward, showed her federal badge, and in one crisp, clear voice said, "She hacked a federal-level biometric gate. That's a cyber felony, and she just committed a federal crime while making a false beread. Report to 911. Her face fell. The tech goons tried to run, but the K9s had them on the ground before they cleared 20 feet. I walked out, finally, slow, hands on my belt, and simply said, "You walked into the wrong ranch, Karen." What followed was a beautiful blend of justice and exposure. Karen was cuffed, read her rights, and her phone was confiscated. Haley connected it to her laptop on the spot and showed the sheriff real-time logs texts to HOA board members saying things like, Operation entry begins at 10:00. Make sure the sheriff's delay is done right. At least 2 minutes, and, if the gate opens, I'll declare an emergency and get them swatted. It was premeditated. It was criminal. And now, it was all going public. News helicopters arrived within the hour. Apparently, one of Haley's FBI friends had tipped off the media about the situation after verifying the location was under a federal protection designation due to past harassment from HOA entities. I stood there as microphones were pushed toward me, and all I said was, "She wanted control. Now she's got bars." The rest of the day spiraled into legend. The HOA board tried to distance themselves, but Haley had emails, Slack messages, and HOA meeting minutes showing the board had authorized the Tech Entry Recon project as a defensive community maneuver. That was enough to implicate them all in conspiracy to commit trespass and cyber intrusion. As Karen sat in the back of the sheriff's car, mouth still moving like she could argue her way out, Haley uploaded every shred of evidence to the Foundation's server, the same foundation I created after years of battling Paul. Corrupt HOAs. We had lawyers on standby. We had lawmakers watching. Within 48 hours, federal charges were filed, and the entire HOA board was suspended pending investigation. But that wasn't the end. That was just the opening shot. Over the following week, Haley and I fielded calls from reporters, activists, and homeowners who had suffered similar abuse. Karen's arrest reignited national fury toward HOAs acting like private governments. We published a full dossier online titled "The Gate That Broke the HOA." It went viral. Tens of thousands shared their own stories. Haley hosted a live stream explaining the legal implications of hacking biometric systems, which drew 2 million viewers. She broke it down simply: HOAs are not law enforcement. They cannot enter private property, override security, or call 911 to force compliance. What Karen did is not unique now. But this time, she got caught. HOA officials across the country started resigning preemptively. County commissions began reviewing HOA charters. A senator introduced emergency legislation to classify swatting through HOAs as a federal terrorism enhancement charge. The ripple effect was unstoppable. And through it all, I stayed at the ranch, taking it all in. From the porch, I watched as neighbors once too afraid to speak now showed up with pies, thank you notes, even hand-painted signs reading, "Thank you, Haley." The ranch became more than a home. It became ground zero for change. And
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
It became ground zero for change. And as the sun dipped behind the distant hills that night, I leaned against the gate fully intact, fully locked, and smiled. Because Karen thought she could breach our boundaries, hijack our rights, and rewrite our laws. Instead, she just opened the floodgates on a reckoning. And tomorrow, the real cleanup would begin. But the cleanup wasn't just about emails and hearings. It turned out Karen's HOA was part of a regional alliance, a network of HOAs that shared enforcement officers, private data lists of problem homeowners, and even pooled legal funds to crush lawsuits. Haley dug deeper, using legal subpoenas to unearth a shared server hosted in another state, with gigabytes of documents, some marked as internal strategy, others more sinister. There were maps of properties targeted for acquisition, notes on influential residents to manipulate, and even surveillance footage from drones flying over private land. That changed everything. We turned it over to the Department of Justice, which opened a multi-state investigation. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about dismantling an empire. The DOJ raided 5 HOA offices that week. News stations couldn't keep up. What began with one hacked gate at a ranch now shook the foundation of community governance nationwide. And we weren't done. Not even close. The next step came with the arrival of a federal task force. Haley was offered a leadership position to oversee ongoing investigations into road HOAs abusing power. She took it, but on one condition: the headquarters would be based right on the ranch. We converted my old barn into a command center equipped with servers, communications lines, and satellite support. Soon, agents in windbreakers with DOJ, FBI, and even IRS patches were walking past my cattle each morning. Our ranch became a legal fortress, and neighbors knew the safest place in the state was now behind our gate. The task force began holding hearings across counties. Victims of HOA abuse lined up to testify, veterans evicted over lawn height, widows fined for flags, families harassed for refusing architectural conformity. Haley led each session with poise, flanked by attorneys and armed officers. By month's end, 4 more state legislatures passed HOA reform acts. Governors called her personally. Karen, meanwhile, rotted in a holding facility, awaiting a stacked list of charges. She tried to claim mental illness, but Haley's forensic analysis showed she had purchased surveillance tech 6 months in advance. Calculated, cold, premeditated. Her defense crumbled. HOA communities began holding emergency votes to dissolve their boards. One even renamed their neighborhood Haley Hills in her honor. The media declared the movement the Ranch Revolt, and I couldn't help but grin at how poetic it all was. A gate, a dog, a daughter, and now, a nationwide reckoning. And we still weren't done. The morning after the federal task force set up on my ranch, the air buzzed with more than just the hum of distant cattle and rustling wind through the mesquite. It was heavy with momentum. The kind of weight that builds when something larger than personal revenge starts to unfold, when justice tips from personal vindication into national reckoning. Haley didn't sleep much that night. She'd stayed up mapping out every piece of evidence from Karen's digital empire, pinning screenshots, flagged emails, and HOA alliance maps to the plywood board we set up in the barn's hayloft turned command center. I brought her black coffee in a thermos before sunrise and stood silently as she ran facial recognition matches on the dozens of compliance officers sent by different HOAs, some with past charges of crass, impersonating law enforcement, others with connections to private intelligence firms. What we were unearthing was no longer isolated HOA misbehavior. This was a coordinated effort to weaponize neighborhood power for surveillance, intimidation, and in some cases land grabs. By 9 a.m., 2 unmarked SUVs rolled down our gravel road and outstepped U.S. Marshals. One handed Haley a sealed folder marked Priority Level, Crimson. Inside were authorization papers designating her the liaison to the Interagency Residential Oversight Task Force, a coalition made up of the FBI, Department of Housing, Homeland Security, even a cybercrime unit from the NSA. The marshals explained the significance with a single line: "You've become the face of the anti-HOA movement. Washington's watching." From that moment, the story that started with a hacked gate and a lying HOA president escalated into something bigger, something that could restructure the very fabric of neighborhood governance in America. News stations parked vans on the highway, drone operators buzzed the property trying to get aerial shots of our fortified ranch, and HOA whistleblowers began submitting files through the encrypted server Haley's FBI friends had set up. The scale of corruption was staggering, off book fines used to fund private retreats, board elections rigged with fake ballots, retirees strong-armed into selling properties for pennies under threat of lien foreclosure. Each new revelation added fuel to a fire that now reached Capitol Hill. We decided to go public again, but this time on our own terms. Haley and I set up a live town hall broadcast from the barn, cameras mounted on the old wood beams, our dogs lying calmly in the background as symbols of vigilance. Over 1 million viewers tuned in. Haley stood beneath the American flag we'd salvaged from the burned remains of a veteran's mailbox, one destroyed by an HOA for being too patriotic. She began, "This is no longer about a gate, a lie, or a single Karen. This is about control, the way homeowners are bullied by unaccountable boards, the way communities are held hostage by small tyrants hiding gabble. behind bylaws. Today, that ends. The chat exploded. Former board members turned state witnesses reached out. Prosecutors began issuing mass indictments. Haley introduced legislation co-sponsored by 3 senators and a congresswoman from Texas, the Homeowner Autonomy Act. It banned mandatory HOAs in all new developments, enforced transparency audits, and criminalized impersonation of law enforcement by HOA staff. Karen's case was cited as the inciting incident in the bill's preamble. Within 2 weeks, the president issued a statement applauding the effort and calling for federal review of all HOA systems. The ranch had officially become a beacon of legal reform. Meanwhile, Karen's trial loomed. We didn't need to attend. Haley's team had a mountain of evidence, but we chose to be there. Walking into that courtroom, Haley in her blazer and boots, and me in my old denim jacket, we turned heads. The jury foreman was a retired Navy vet who once lost his home to...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
The jury foreman was a retired Navy vet who once lost his home to an HOA fine. It took them less than 3 hours to deliver a unanimous guilty verdict on 19 charges, ranging from cyber intrusion to domestic terrorism enhancement for the swatting attempt. Karen's sentencing was broadcast nationally. 10 years without parole. Her sobbing family claimed it was unfair. Haley stood on the courthouse steps and said, "What's unfair is what she did to the people she thought were powerless. Today, we proved they're not." The cheers drowned out the reporters. That night, the stars over the ranch seemed brighter, as if the land itself knew something had shifted. But change didn't stop with Karen. Haley coordinated a multi-city task force sweep that took down over 60 rogue HOA boards. Ranchers in Wyoming, suburban families in Ohio, retirees in Florida all stood up, emboldened by the story that started with one locked gate. We created an online registry called Home Free, listing every HOA cited or shut down for abuse. Within 6 months, the map was filled with red pins. Our work had just begun, but already, property law textbooks were being rewritten. Law schools requested Haley for lectures. Documentaries were in the works. A statue of our lead K9 bandit was erected outside the town courthouse with a plaque that read, "Guard Dog of Liberty." And me? I just kept fixing fences, raising cattle, and watching the land I'd fought so hard to protect remain untouched by anyone who thought they had more power than the Constitution allowed. Because sometimes, the biggest revolutions don't start in cities, they start on dusty ranch roads, with daughters who don't back down and gates that hold the line. But that wasn't all. As Haley's national visibility increased, so did the pressure from political lobbyists tied to corporate real estate interests. These groups had used HOAs as tools to control property values, limit diversity in neighborhoods, and run unchecked. Now they wanted to discredit her. First came the OPEDs questioning her authority. Then came bogus ethics complaints, all of which were publicly dismantled with receipts and digital forensics. One day, a fake news crew showed up at the gate trying to claim our ranch was part of a militia compound. Haley calmly walked out, flashed her badge, and showed them the live satellite feed from our federal partners. They turned around real fast. But it got worse when the opposition hired a private firm to audit her past cases at the Bureau. They found nothing, only commendations. The smear campaign failed, but it made us realize the fight had moved into a deeper arena: policy warfare. So... Haley pivoted. She created a non-profit, free-range law. Its mission was to provide legal representation for victims of HOA abuse, fund lobbying against HOA overreach, and educate Americans about their property rights. Within weeks, chapters opened in 24 states. She trained lawyers, led town hall seminars, and testified in Congress. Her words, "We are not anti-community, we are pro-freedom." As donations poured in and court victories stacked up, the tide turned. Cities started offering homeowners opt-out provisions. Insurance companies stopped honoring HOA liens unless verified by municipal review. The balance of power was shifting, and it all began with a daughter who refused to be silent. On the 1-year anniversary of Karen's arrest, we held a bonfire at the ranch. Veterans, farmers, suburban moms, they all came. Bandit, old but proud, lay by the fire, watching the stars. Haley stood up and said, "This land taught me what America's supposed to feel like, free. We protect that." And I knew then, the war wasn't over, but we'd won the most important battle, giving people back their voice.